Indoor Matters with Damien and Sarah.
Welcome to Indoor Matters, the podcast where we talk about what really matters to your health indoors. I'm your host, Damien.
Hi, Damien.
And I'm here today with Sarah, our resident expert on indoor environmental quality.
Hi, everyone.
Sarah, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a really interesting case that Saniservice handled here in Dubai.
I love a good case study.
It's about a family who thought they had a pretty healthy home,
Oh, really?
but were actually being affected by some hidden environmental problems.
You never know what's lurking beneath the surface.
And before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to Saniservice Dubai's only indoor environmental health quality management company.
They're the best.
They've been around since 2009, and they're really dedicated to improving indoor health here in the UAE.
Yeah, they do it all.
They can help you with everything from air quality to water quality to surface testing.
Whatever you need.
So if you have any concerns about your indoor environment, you can give them a call at 800-7264 or visit their website at www.saniservice.com.
And don't forget to mention Indoor Matters for a special discount on their indoor science testing services.
Absolutely. So let's get back to this case study. We had a client, Mr. Kyle, who lived with his family in a beautiful villa in Meydan.
Fancy.
You know, one of those upscale, well-maintained homes.
Yeah, I can picture it.
But Mr. Kyle and his family were experiencing some pretty persistent respiratory problems.
Oh, no, that's not good.
Things like coughing and congestion.
Sounds miserable.
And what's interesting is that they noticed their symptoms would actually improve when they were away from home.
That's a big clue.
Right. So it seemed like something in their home environment was triggering these issues.
Like some kind of allergy.
Yeah. And to make things even more mysterious, there was this subtle, musty odor in certain areas of the house.
A musty smell is never a good sign.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. The lead indoor environmental specialist at Saniservice went to inspect the property.
I bet they were ready to get to the bottom of it.
And what's amazing is that there were no visible signs of water damage or mold.
You're kidding.
Nope. The specialist even noted how clean and well-maintained the villa was.
So the problem was completely hidden.
Exactly. It was one of those cases where, something's not right, but you can't see it.
It's a good reminder that appearances can be deceiving.
So Saniservice decided to conduct a really thorough environmental assessment.
I bet they brought out the big guns.
Oh, yeah. This went way beyond just a visual inspection.
So what did they do?
Well, first they did a detailed walkthrough with Mr. Kyle and his family.
Talking to the occupants is so important.
Absolutely. They wanted to understand the family's symptoms, when they were better, when they were worse. Looking for any patterns.
Right, trying to connect the dots.
Exactly. They also asked about the history of the building, any past maintenance issues.
See if there were any red flags.
And then they moved on to some more advanced testing methods.
The fun stuff.
They collected air samples from different rooms in the villa.
To analyze the air quality.
Yeah. And they also took surface swabs from walls, floors, and other areas they thought might be problematic.
Looking for hidden mold.
Precisely. And to check for hidden moisture, they used non-invasive moisture meters and thermal imaging cameras.
Thermal imaging is amazing. You can see temperature differences that might indicate moisture.
It's like having X-ray vision for your walls.
Exactly.
And during this initial investigation, two things really stood out.
Oh, I bet this is where the mystery starts to unravel.
The first was that musty odor they had noticed in the powder room.
Remember we talked about that earlier?
Yep. Even though there was no visible mold, that smell is often a strong indicator that something's growing somewhere.
Mold often releases volatile organic compounds that have that characteristic musty smell.
So even if you can't see it, you can often smell it.
It's like a silent alarm.
And the second thing was they found these tiny, unidentified black insects in that same powder room.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
And these weren't your typical household pests like ants or cockroaches.
So something more unusual.
So they sent the initial testing results back to the lab, and now they definitely confirmed the family's concerns.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
The surface sampling showed some pretty high levels of mold in certain areas.
Higher than what's considered safe.
For example, the swab they took from the shower head was clean.
That's good news, at least.
But the swabs from the right side wall in the entrance and the powder room floor.
The places where they found those insects?
Right. Those came back as too numerous to count.
Wow, that's a lot of mold.
Which means there were way more than 500 colony-forming units, or CFUs.
And to put that into perspective, the control sample they took from an unaffected area showed 0 CFUs.
So there was a huge difference.
So these weren't just small patches of mold. This was a serious problem.
And the air quality testing also revealed some concerning results.
I'm guessing those tiny insects were a clue.
You're right about that. The air quality in some rooms, like the master bedroom, the living room, and the kitchen, were either within or slightly above the acceptable range.
Which is less than 500 spores per cubic meter.
Nah. But the powder room and the entrance hall had much higher spore counts.
Like how much higher?
The powder room had a whopping 3,250 spores per cubic meter.
That's over 6 times the acceptable limit.
And the entrance hall wasn't much better at 2,875 spores per cubic meter.
That's crazy. And what kind of mold were they finding?
The dominant types in the powder room were Stachybotrys and Aspergillus.
Stachybotrys is often called black mold, and it can be pretty nasty.
Yeah, and in the entrance hall, they found Stachybotrys and Cutomium.
So a mix of potentially harmful molds.
And what's even more interesting is that the outdoor air sample they took had a lower overall spore count and different types of mold.
So the indoor air was actually worse than the outdoor air?
Which is pretty surprising considering we live in Dubai.
Yeah, you'd think the outdoor air would be more polluted.
But in this case, the indoor air quality was the real problem.
Especially in those specific rooms.
And remember those mystery insects we talked about?
The tiny black ones.
Yeah, well, they turned out to be a crucial piece of the puzzle.
I knew it.
The Saniservice team collected some of those insects and sent them to their microbiology lab.
To get a closer look.
And after examining them under a microscope, they brought in their expert entomologist from the pest control division.
The bug expert.
And guess what they identified them as?
Mold beetles.
Mold beetles. Exactly.
I've heard of them, but I've never actually seen one.
They're pretty tiny. And what's really fascinating about them is that they feed almost exclusively on mold.
So they're like little mold detectors.
Exactly. Their presence in a home is a very reliable indicator that there's hidden mold somewhere.
It's like they're leading you right to the source.
And sometimes they can even reveal mold infestations that might be missed by conventional testing methods.
So they're like tiny little detectives.
It's a perfect example of how nature can give us clues about our environment.
And how different specialties can work together to solve a problem.
Absolutely. So with all the evidence in hand, the investigation revealed some key findings.
Let's hear it.
First, they found significant mold growth behind the wall in the entrance area and under the flooring in the powder room.
The places where they found those mold beetles?
Exactly. And the presence of the mold beetles confirmed that this wasn't a new or a small infestation. It was an established problem.
And it had probably been growing for a while.
And the types of mold they identified, especially Stachybotrys and Aspergillus, were consistent with the respiratory symptoms Mr. Kyle's family was experiencing.
So the mold was most likely the cause of their health issues.
But then the big question became, where was the moisture coming from that was allowing all this mold to grow?
You can't have mold without moisture.
It's like the essential ingredient.
So where was it coming from?
Well, they did some more digging and discovered a slow, undetected leak from a water supply pipe inside the wall near the entrance.
Aha, a hidden leak.
And in the powder room, they found that the waterproofing membrane under the floor tiles had been improperly installed.
Some moisture was seeping in.
And when you consider the high humidity we have here in Dubai,
Yeah, it's a recipe for mold disaster.
even a small ongoing leak or moisture intrusion can create the perfect conditions for mold to thrive.
It's like a tropical rainforest in your home.
So once they knew the extent of the mold contamination and the source of the moisture, Saniservice put together a remediation plan that involved both mold removal and pest management strategies.
A two-pronged approach.
Exactly. They wanted to tackle the mold and the conditions that were allowing it to grow, as well as get rid of those mold beetles.
Makes sense. You gotta hit it from all angles.
So they implemented a 4-phase process.
I'm all ears.
Phase 1 was all about containment and preparation. They set up negative air pressure systems to prevent mold spores from spreading.
So they sealed off the affected areas.
And they used HEPA filtration devices to capture any airborne spores.
HEPA filters are great at trapping tiny particles.
And they also established strict decontamination zones for workers and equipment.
To prevent cross-contamination.
Phase 2 was the actual removal and treatment. They physically removed all the mold-affected materials.
Like the flooring and drywall.
Yeah, and they repaired that leaking water pipe and fixed the waterproofing in the powder room.
Getting rid of those moisture sources.
And because they had those mold beetles, they also used targeted low-toxicity pesticides to eliminate them.
Just taking care of the bugs, too.
After removing everything, they applied antimicrobial treatments to the underlying structural elements and did a deep clean with HEPA vacuums.
Making sure everything was thoroughly sanitized.
Phase 3 was restoration. They installed a new waterproofing membrane in the powder room, replaced all the removed building materials with moisture-resistant ones.
Rebuilding it better.
And they made sure to use mold-resistant finishes where appropriate and installed the flooring with proper moisture barrier.
To prevent future problems.
All about prevention.
Couldn't agree more.
And the final phase was verification testing. They took air and surface samples after the remediation to make sure the mold was gone.
Checking their work.
And they did a follow-up inspection to confirm the mold beaters were eradicated.
No more tiny detectives.
And the results were incredible.
Tell me everything.
The air quality improved dramatically. In the powder room, the spore count went from 3,250 down to just 125 spores per cubic meter.
Wow, that's a huge reduction.
A 96.2% reduction, to be exact.
That's amazing.
The entrance hall also saw a massive improvement from 2,875 down to 150 spores per cubic meter.
Almost as good as new.
And the overall average indoor spore count in the entire villa was reduced by 90.5%.
Talk about a breath of fresh air.
And the post-remediation testing confirmed that all the mold in the affected areas was gone.
Gone for good.
The air quality was back to normal. The mold beetles were gone, and even the musty odors were completely eliminated.
That's a happy ending.
And most importantly, Mr. Kyle's family reported that their respiratory problems completely disappeared.
That's what it's all about.
They were finally able to breathe easy in their own home.
And all thanks to some thorough investigation and a comprehensive remediation plan.
But Saniservice didn't stop there. They also gave Mr. Kyle and his family a long-term prevention plan.
To keep their home healthy.
They recommended regular environmental monitoring, like quarterly air quality checks for the first year, and then annual mold inspections.
Staying ahead of any potential problems.
And they also advised on moisture control measures, like installing humidity monitors and trying to maintain optimal humidity levels.
Which can be tough in Dubai.
But it's important. They also emphasized regular inspections for leaks and recommended quarterly pest inspections.
To catch any early signs of trouble.
And of course, they stressed the importance of proper HVAC system maintenance and high-efficiency air filtration.
Keeping the air clean.
This whole case really shows the importance of collaboration between mold remediation and pest control experts.
It's like a dream team.
What started as seemingly minor issues turned out to be a significant hidden mold problem.
And it could have continued to affect the family's health if it wasn't addressed properly.
This case really highlights a few key takeaways.
I'm taking notes.
First, we need to go beyond just what we can see and use thorough environmental testing if we suspect a problem.
Right, don't just rely on your eyes.
And we learned how valuable biological indicators like mold beetles can be.
They're like nature's warning signs.
And it's crucial to not just remove the mold, but also address the root cause.
Which in this case was hidden moisture.
And ultimately, this case reminds us of the direct link between our indoor environment and our health.
What we breathe matters.
And Saniservice's integrated approach, bringing together different experts under one roof, is a model for success.
It's all about a holistic approach.
This collaborative model is now their standard practice, and it's leading to better solutions and better health outcomes for people in Dubai and across the UAE.
It's great to see companies like Saniservice leading the way.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What hidden environmental factors might be subtly affecting your own health right now?
It's a good question to ask.
It's a reminder that we need to be aware of our indoor environment and take steps to protect our health.
Absolutely. Our health is our most valuable asset.
And that's what Indoor Matters is all about.
Thanks for having me, Damien.
Thanks for joining me, Sarah. And thanks to all of you for listening to Indoor Matters.
Stay healthy, everyone.
We'll see you next time.